Chapter 18. Orientation. Most people who have had a job have attended an orientation class before they started working there. Orientation is designed to inform you of important information about your new job, such as the company's policies and safety procedures. It's also when you'll get all the technicalities out of the way, such as filling out your W-4 tax forms and signing up for benefits. In a typical job, by the time you attend orientation class, you're already pre-approved for the job. Trucking is a bit different in that respect. To hire on with a trucking company, you'll fill out an application and talk to a recruiter who will put you through an initial screening process to make sure you meet the company's minimum requirements. If you meet their standards, you'll be asked to come to orientation to finish the hiring process. Just showing up at orientation doesn't guarantee a job. Remember the guy who couldn't downshift from the last chapter? That happened at orientation. But first things first, you've got to get to orientation first.
Where is orientation held, and how do I get there?
Orientation is typically held at either a company's headquarters or a company terminal. As we discussed earlier, there's a good chance you won't live right next door to a company's terminal. Are you broke? Wondering how you're going to pay for travel expenses? Don't worry. You'll need a little meal money, but all large companies will pay for your transportation to get to orientation. Your recruiter will determine which terminal you're closest to and arrange one-way transportation to get you there on a set date that a class is starting.
Keep in mind that they hire thousands of drivers every year, so don't expect a limo driver holding a jar of Grey Poupon. Oh, you people are so pathetic. There's a link in the text version.
At the very worst, it'll be a bus ticket. Now, I've personally never ridden a bus, but the evil overlord has. From her description and from other drivers I've talked to, God might be in heaven right now designing hell as an eternally long bus ride. There are stops in every podunk town along the way. A trip that takes 8 hours in a car might translate into a 15-hour bus ride. And the people who frequent the bus, well, that's just scary. Driving your own vehicle. If you wish to avoid the bus, most companies will reimburse you for gas up to the amount of what the bus fare would have been. Remember that this is a one-way affair, so you either have to find someone to drive you there or leave your vehicle at the terminal and pick it up later. Also, they probably won't pay for your trip home if for some reason you can't be hired. That's all the more reason not to lie on your application. Some companies will opt to rent a car for you. You'll pick up the car at your local car rental place and drive it one way to the city where orientation is being held. Some will let you keep the car for the duration of orientation to get you from the hotel to the terminal. Other companies will have you turn in the vehicle when you get to town, and a company van will shuttle you from the hotel to the terminal every day. Keep all your gas receipts, as they will typically be reimbursed either at orientation or on your first paycheck. Another option is flying. Although not used a lot, sometimes it's cheaper to fly over a great distance than it would be to reimburse you for a rental car, gas, and hotel bills. We live in Missouri, and one particular carrier flew us to the West Coast for orientation because they didn't have any terminals with orientation near our home. Of course, this was pre-9/11 when airfares were lower. You don't hear about this option much, mainly because most large companies have terminals strategically located across the map. I suppose there could be one other option, the train. Depending on train schedules and the cities they serve, I guess the train could be a viable option. Although I have to say, in all my years of trucking, I've never been offered this option or ever heard of anyone taking a train to get to orientation. But hey, never say never. The Eagles got back together, didn't they?
Will I get paid for orientation?
Again, this all depends on the individual company. Some figure that paying your transportation and hotel bill is enough. Even if the company you choose does pay you for orientation, don't expect much. You'll be lucky to get $50 a day. I've worked for both types, so be sure not to judge a company by whether or not they have orientation pay. Being only a 3 or 4 day process, it's really not a deal breaker. Still, be sure to ask your recruiter up front so you won't be surprised when you get to class. The words surprise and orientation don't go well together. I remember a particular orientation where we witnessed a surprise. The class instructor was discussing pay rates when 8 or 10 guys in class started getting a bit restless and talking amongst themselves. Turns out they were told by the recruiters that they'd be getting 1 cent more per mile than what they had just been told. 1 penny may not sound like that much, but it's still not what they were told. At first, I thought that the company must have a recruiter who was a big fat liar pants on fire. Upon further investigation, each driver had a different recruiter, so apparently the company had neglected to inform some of the recruiters about a pay change. Naturally, I immediately verified that our recruiter hadn't misinformed us also. Thankfully, our pay rate was correct. What really surprised me was that none of those drivers got up and left. I turned to the evil overlord and asked, if you just found out you were going to be making less money than you were told initially, would you still be sitting here?
No way. If they can't get that right, what else are they going to screw up?
My sentiments? Exactly. Thankfully, we were on a dedicated fleet that was completely separate from the rest of the drivers. As I said, surprises and orientation don't mix.
What do I need to bring to orientation?
Your recruiter will likely give you a list of things to bring with you when they set up your travel arrangements. If they don't, ask them. Here's what you should plan for. 2 forms of identification. Your CDL and Social Security card are best. If you already have a U.S. passport, bring it. If you'll be required to go to Canada but don't have a passport, bring your birth certificate and keep it in the truck.
Your DOT medical card, if you already have one, and the long form to go with it. If you don't know what a long form is, you probably don't have one.
Your MVR, motor vehicle record. If you can't remember the specifics of all your traffic citations, go to your local Department of Motor Vehicle office and have them print one off for a few bucks. A copy of your driving school diploma if you're fresh out of school. Names, addresses, telephone numbers, and starting and ending dates of employments of your past employers. The amount of work history required will range from 3 to 10 years, depending on each company's guidelines.
And yes, this sucks just as bad as it sounds. At least we have the internet now. Back when we started, we had to dial information to get phone numbers to all our old employers. Once you have this list compiled, be sure to save it somewhere you know you can find it again, because every time you switch jobs, you'll need all this info.
Accident reports. If you've had any vehicular accidents, have your insurance company give you a printout with information such as date, location, preventable or non-preventable, and cost of damages. Names, addresses, phone numbers, birth dates, including the year, and Social Security numbers of anyone who will be covered by your health insurance or listed as a beneficiary on your life insurance. A blank voided check if you want to get paid by direct deposit. I highly recommend you do, especially if you have family at home who will need access to the money. Money for meals. Lunch will probably be provided for you during orientation, and many of the hotels serve some sort of breakfast. If they don't, you're usually on your own for breakfast and dinner. Ask in advance what meals will be provided. 1 duffel bag with enough clothes to cover orientation and the time before you go home for the first time. This will depend on how long your training period is. If you don't want to carry that many clothes, you can do laundry at truck stops. 1 smaller bag or backpack for basic toiletries like shampoo, body wash or soap, toothpaste, toothbrush, a shaving kit, and deodorant, if you go for that sort of thing. Bring a pair of those cheap rubber flip-flop sandals for showering. Truck stops provide towels and soap. You may also want to bring a towel if your company has showers at its terminals. A sleeping bag and a pillow. A cell phone or a calling card to communicate with home. You'll be provided with an 800 number to communicate with the company. A notebook for taking notes. Some companies may also tell you to bring a road atlas and a calculator. There is no sense in taking a CB radio, satellite radio, other electronics, or tools to orientation. Your trainer probably won't have room in his truck. We've got more on trainers in the next chapter.
How long is orientation going to last?
Each company is different. The average orientation is anywhere from 2 to 4 days long. You'll typically ride, drive, or fly into town the night before orientation and check in at a hotel that the company has prearranged and paid for. If you're a team operation, you'll share a room with your partner. If you're alone, you'll likely share a room, separate beds, with another driver that is attending the same orientation class. The company will usually try to match you with another driver depending on your smoking preference, but as I've said before, there are no guarantees in trucking. Up until recently, I had no experience sharing a room with a strange man. With the evil overlord as my team driver, we always shared a room. After she quit and I went solo, I preferred to pay for the other half of the room rather than be stuck with some driver who'd want to talk me to death. It's not like I'd have to share a bed with the guy, but I got spoiled never having to room with a stranger before. As a woman, you'll get your own room, unless, of course, there's another female solo driver to room with. But then there was the time that I didn't have the money to get my own room. I have to say that my experience went well. Andrew and I got along great. We talked on many subjects and enjoyed plenty of laughs. He was clean and respectful. Knowing drivers as I do, I feel fortunate. I could have been stuck with a slob with BO and bad breath. I could have had to endure one of those guys who doesn't seem to realize that he's the only one laughing at his own joke. I feel lucky, so let's hope I never have to do it again. No sense in pushing my luck. How many nights you stay in the hotel naturally depends on how many days orientation is. Normally, on the final morning of orientation, you'll check out of the hotel and bring all your stuff to class with you, so you can be ready to hit the road with your trainer at the end of the day. On the first day of orientation, you've got to pass the big 3 before you can get hired: the drug test, the road test, and the DOT physical. I've provided a link to the FMCSA website on all the specifics of the DOT physical. One of the first things that will be done is the drug test, so make sure you either hold off on your morning whiz, or if that's not possible, do your business the second you wake up and start drinking liquid so you'll be able to perform again when it's required. If you get to class and you're about to burst, don't feel shy about asking to go ahead and get it over with before you leave a sprawling puddle somewhere. Now, this may seem like a no-brainer, but it took a few orientations with me guzzling water for an hour before I learned this lesson. If you know you can't pass the drug test, you shouldn't have wasted the time coming to orientation in the first place. If you fail, pack your bags. You may even be paying your own way home. The second hurdle is passing the road test. They'll usually pull 2 or 3 other drivers out of class to go all at once. This could possibly include a complete pre-trip inspection, but usually it just involves a visual walk-around to check your lights and tires. Sometimes you'll skip it altogether and get straight to the scary part. The actual road test is just a short drive with a road tester who will tell you where to go while they watch your driving habits. They'll undoubtedly ask you to back the truck at some point. Take your time and do it right. Get out and look numerous times if you need to. It's doubtful that a road tester will say anything to you as long as you don't take 30 minutes to back into a wide open spot. If they do, just tell them this: I was taught that a good backing job is a safe backing job, no matter how long it takes. That's what I was taught, even if you weren't. It's hard to argue with that, so use it if you need to. Remember that your road tester isn't there to help you. They're there to evaluate you. So in backing, don't ask them for help, because they won't. Pretend like they aren't there, because in real-life situations, they won't be. Just don't hit anything, and you'll be peachy. Still suck at shifting? We did. Even experienced drivers will usually grind a gear or two in an unfamiliar truck, but you, a student straight out of school, grind them something awful. We both did, to the point that we didn't know if we'd pass or fail. We passed, and you will too, as long as you remain safe. If you miss a gear, just remain as calm as your nerves will allow and try to put it into gear without coming to a complete stop. The road test at orientation is without a doubt the worst fear you'll face as a new student just out of driving school. There's no doubt you'll be sweating buckets, especially with older, more experienced drivers looking on. Just remember, despite how the old-timers act, no one was born shifting a truck, and everyone, including your road tester, knows that. The last of the big 3 is your DOT physical that was discussed in an earlier chapter.
Now, you may be able to skip this step if you already have a current medical card. Just make sure you bring it to prove it to the instructor. If you forget to bring it, or if your card is about to expire, you'll either go to a nearby clinic along with a few other drivers, or a company-approved doctor will come to the terminal. If the doctor is on site, you'll be examined in a private room.
Once you get your medical card from your doctor, you're pretty much out of the woods, providing you didn't lie about anything on your application that could be caught by the personnel department later on. There's perhaps one more thing I should mention. Remember how I said that trucking companies may have certain physical requirements in order to drive for them? Well, the last 2 companies I've worked for have tested me on this. In both instances, all the drivers were asked to do a series of maneuvers that showed whether we met their standards. For instance, we had to pick up a 50-pound crate and walk a few distances of 53 feet. Another thing we had to do was lift a weighted crate onto a shelf 3 times. There are a few other similar exercises they may have you do. During this time, they'll be monitoring your heart rate. It has to stay under a certain limit in order for you to pass. Now, don't start worrying about this. The first time we encountered this test, the evil overlord was worried about it as she wasn't in the best of shape at the time. She passed easily. The second time when I went solo, another woman of average size passed without any problems. There are even some extremely obese men who've passed this test.
Heck, a couple of them actually had lower heart rates than I did. How unfair is that? Someone hand me a gallon of Ben & Jerry's.
So like I said, don't fret your pretty little head over it.
What else is going to happen at orientation?
The rest of orientation will be taken up with safety and hazmat training, covering company policies, such as payroll periods and home time periods, and in-truck satellite procedures. In case I forgot to mention it, your main form of communication with your boss, also known as your dispatcher, they like to be called fleet managers or some other important sounding title, is via satellite. You have a keyboard in your truck that you use to send information back and forth. They send you load information, such as where to pick up and deliver loads, and you send information back, such as when you arrive at a shipper or deliver a load. All of this will be explained in orientation. Pay attention because every large trucking company uses a similar setup. You'll also finish filling out all the paperwork necessary, such as W-4 forms for tax withholdings, anything you may have left blank on your application, and insurance forms. An insurance person may meet with you separately and talk to you about the benefits packages and help you choose the right medical plan for you and your family. A tip for husband and wife teams here. Since we don't have kids, many times it was cheaper for us to get individual coverage rather than the family plan, so make sure you look at the costs closely. Last, and certainly least, one of the company bigwigs will probably show up and bless you with their presence by giving a speech about how important you are to them and their company. They'll probably mention the words "like family" numerous times before the end of their blab fest.
Whatever.
As boring as orientation can sometimes be, try to pay attention whenever possible. As a new driver, you'll need most of the information just to be able to function in your new job. Then again, if you have your co-driver in class with you, you can always do like the evil overlord did. She always made me pay attention so she could play cell phone games all day with the mute button on. The heartless wench. Well, that pretty much covers orientation. Sure, it can be as boring as watching your armpit hair grow, but everyone's got to go through it. Just try to keep from slitting your wrist during the hazmat lecture or video, which is possibly the most boring topic of all things boring on planet Earth. I'd rather hear about the in-laws' ailments for 24 hours straight than sit through one 30-minute hazmat lecture. Ready to go, Captain Independent?
Yipper.
Put your cape and way too tight tights away. Trust me, no one wants to see you in tights. You're not quite free yet. Sometime during the last day of class, you'll be assigned a trainer.